Welcome, kitties, whether you believe it or not. Vampires are real, and today, I will share with you 3 terrifying vampire stories that will haunt your dreams. Get ready for a terrifying experience. Be sure to grab your glass of pure human blood, because you're about to have a bloody good time. Now, sit back, relax, and get ready to be terrified. Do you dare to watch?
We were looking for the ideal house, out in a rural area close to Forks, Washington. My wife Claire and I had grown tired of the relentless hustle and bustle of city life in Seattle. We longed for peace, quiet, and the serenity of nature. When we stumbled upon the listing for a charming, secluded house on the outskirts of Forks, it felt like fate. The price was unbelievably low, almost too good to be true. I couldn't help but wonder what the catch was. But the excitement of starting a new chapter in our lives overshadowed any doubts. We sold our house in Seattle and moved into our new home within weeks. The property was surrounded by dense, evergreen forests, and the air was crisp and fresh. It was everything we had dreamed of. On our first day, as we unpacked, I noticed another house a few blocks away. It was an old, Gothic-style mansion, partially hidden by overgrown trees. I was surprised to see neighbors so close by, given how remote the area felt. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to introduce myself. I walked over and knocked on the door, but there was no answer. I assumed they were out, perhaps at work, and returned home. Later that evening, around 8 p.m., I decided to try again. This time, the door creaked open, and standing before me was the most beautiful girl I had ever seen.
Hi there. Welcome to the neighborhood. Please come inside. We've been expecting you.
She looked to be in her early 20s, with pale skin, dark hair, and piercing blue eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light.
Hello, my name is Vesper. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Vesper. It was an unusual name for 2025, but it suited her perfectly. There was something ethereal about her, something that drew me in instantly. She smiled warmly and invited me inside. The interior of the house was just as grand and mysterious as the exterior, with antique furniture, heavy velvet curtains, and candelabras casting flickering shadows on the walls. I met her parents, who introduced themselves as Lucius and Celine. They were strikingly elegant, with an air of timeless sophistication. They welcomed me to the neighborhood, but there was something unsettling about them. Their movements were too smooth, too deliberate, and their eyes seemed to pierce right through me. As we chatted, I noticed a faint, coppery smell in the air. It reminded me of blood, but I brushed it off, thinking it was just my imagination. Over the next few weeks, I found myself drawn to Vesper and her family. They were fascinating, with stories of traveling the world and living in various exotic locations. Vesper and I developed a close friendship, spending hours talking about art, literature, and life. She had an old-world charm that was intoxicating.
Oh my, you are such an interesting man. Please tell me more about yourself.
And I couldn't help but feel a deep connection to her. But as time went on, strange things began to happen. Animals in the area started disappearing, and rumors of mysterious deaths in nearby towns began to circulate. Claire grew increasingly uneasy, urging me to stay away from Vesper and her family.
Honey, I need you to stay away from Vesper and her family. There's something inherently evil about this family.
I dismissed her concerns, but deep down, I couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease. One night, I decided to confront Vesper. I went to her house and found her sitting alone in the dimly lit parlor. She looked up at me with those haunting blue eyes and smiled.
I know you have questions. I was meaning to tell you everything. This is going to shock you, but I am 4,000 years old, and I am not human. I am a vampire.
She told me everything. Her family were vampires, ancient beings who had lived for centuries. They had chosen this remote location to escape the prying eyes of the modern world. Vesper confessed that they fed on the blood of animals, and occasionally, humans. But we're not monsters, she insisted. We only take what we need to survive. I was stunned, but instead of fear, I felt a strange sense of relief. The pieces of the puzzle had finally fallen into place. Vesper's beauty, her family's timeless elegance, the coppery smell, it all made sense now. But as much as I cared for her, I couldn't ignore the danger they posed. Claire and I began researching ways to protect ourselves. We discovered that sunlight was one of the few things that could truly destroy a vampire. We also learned that vampires slept during the day, hidden away in caskets or dark, secluded spaces. Armed with this knowledge, I devised a plan. Early one morning, just before dawn, I crept over to their house. The forest was eerily silent, and the only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath my feet. I carried a crowbar, a lighter, and a can of gasoline. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached the mansion. The windows were all covered with heavy curtains, and the house looked like a fortress of darkness. I broke a window at the back of the house and slipped inside. The air was cold and stale, and the coppery smell was stronger than ever. I moved quickly, ripping apart the curtains and throwing open every window I could find. Sunlight began to pour into the house, illuminating the dusty, ornate furniture and casting long shadows on the walls. Next, I made my way to the basement, where I suspected they kept their caskets. The door was locked, but I used the crowbar to force it open. Inside, I found 3 ornate caskets, each one more elaborate than the last. I doused them in gasoline and lit a match. The flames roared to life, consuming the caskets and filling the basement with smoke. As the fire spread, I heard panicked screams coming from upstairs. Vesper, Lucius, and Celine burst out of their hiding places, their faces twisted in terror. They scrambled to escape the flames, but as they ran into the sunlight-filled rooms, their skin began to sizzle and burn. Vesper turned to me, her eyes wide with betrayal and fear. "Why?" she screamed, her voice echoing through the house. "I'm sorry," I replied, my voice trembling, "but I can't let you hurt anyone else." The sunlight intensified, and one by one, the vampires were vaporized, their bodies disintegrating into ash. The fire continued to rage, consuming the house and everything inside. I stood outside, watching as the mansion collapsed in on itself, the flames reaching high into the sky. When it was over, there was nothing left but smoldering ruins. Claire joined me, and we stood in silence, staring at the destruction we had wrought. It was a bittersweet victory. We had rid the world of a dangerous threat, but the cost was heavy. The vampires next door were gone, but their memory would haunt us forever. And so, we began to rebuild our lives, forever changed by the darkness we had encountered. The forest around our home felt quieter now, as if the land itself was mourning the loss of its ancient inhabitants. But we knew we had done what was necessary, even if it meant carrying the weight of our actions for the rest of our days.
Losing my job was a blow I hadn't seen coming. After years of stability, the company downsized, and I was one of the first to go. I spent months applying for new positions, but rejection after rejection chipped away at my confidence. Bills piled up, and the weight of my debts grew heavier with each passing day. Desperation set in, and I turned to driving for ride-hailing apps as a last resort. It wasn't glamorous, but it was the only way to keep the roof over my head and food on the table. The hours were brutal 12 to 14-hour shifts, 7 days a week. My car became my second home, and the constant hum of the engine was my only companion. I barely saw my wife Sarah anymore.
Honey, you are working too hard. You never have time for me.
I know, but what choice do we have here? I don't know what else I could do more. She tried to be supportive, but I could see the worry in her eyes. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was about money or how tired I looked. I hated putting her through this, but I didn't have a choice. I had to keep going. One evening, as I was about to call it a night, a high-paying request popped up on my app. Nearly $300 for a 50-mile trip. It was unusual, but I didn't question it. I needed the money. I accepted the ride and drove to the pickup location, a dimly lit street on the outskirts of the city. The passenger was a woman in her mid-20s, with pale skin and an ethereal beauty that seemed almost unnatural. She slid into the back seat, her movements graceful and deliberate.
Thank you for picking me up. I've been trying to get home for hours, but no one would stop. I was starting to think I'd be stranded forever.
My pleasure, I replied, forcing a smile. Something about her made me uneasy, but I brushed it off as exhaustion. Halfway through the ride, she asked me to pull over for a moment.
Could you please pull over for just a few seconds? I have something important to do.
I obliged, stopping on the side of a deserted road. That's when I saw either reflection in the rearview mirror. Her face twisted into something grotesque, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light, and her teeth elongating into sharp fangs. Before I could react, she lunged at me, her cold hands gripping my shoulders as she sank her teeth into my neck. Pain shot through me, and then everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, disoriented and weak. The doctor said I'd been found unconscious in my car, having lost a significant amount of blood. They performed an emergency transfusion and kept me overnight for observation. Sarah was by my side, her face pale with worry.
I thank God that you're okay. We will get through this.
What happened? She asked, her voice trembling. I didn't have an answer. I couldn't remember much beyond the woman in the back seat and the searing pain in my neck. When I was released, I thought the worst was over. But as the days passed, I began to notice changes. My senses sharpened to an almost unbearable degree. I could hear conversations from across the street, smell the faintest traces of perfume or sweat, and see in the dark as if it were daylight. At first, I thought it was some kind of side effect from the transfusion, but then the craving started. Food became repulsive. The smell of Sarah's cooking, once comforting, now made me nauseous. I tried to force myself to eat, but I'd vomit almost immediately. My body was rejecting everything except one thing: blood. The realization horrified me, but the hunger was relentless. I started small, trapping rats and raccoons in the backyard, draining their blood in secret. It kept me going, but it wasn't enough. The craving for human blood grew stronger every day, a constant gnawing ache that I couldn't ignore. One night, the hunger became too much to bear. I found myself wandering the streets, drawn to the rhythmic pulse of a passerby's heartbeat. My body moved on its own, my instincts taking over. I followed them, my senses zeroing in on the warmth of their veins. Just as I was about to give in, I stopped myself, retreating into the shadows, trembling with fear and self-loathing. I couldn't let this happen. I couldn't become a monster. Desperate for answers, I turned to the internet, scouring forums and obscure websites for information about what I was becoming. That's when I stumbled upon a cryptic message board. Users spoke of a secretive underworld, a society of beings like me who had been turned against their will. They called themselves the Eternal Covenant, a network of vampires who lived among humans, bound by strict rules to avoid detection. According to the posts, they had a code: never turn someone without consent, never kill when feeding, and always remain in the shadows. I reached out to them, using a pseudonym, and to my surprise, I received a response. They instructed me to meet at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The message was clear: come alone and come at midnight. The warehouse was dimly lit, the air thick with tension. As I stepped inside, I was met by a group of figures cloaked in shadows. At the center stood Lucian, the Covenant's leader. He was tall and imposing, with piercing eyes that seemed to see straight through me.
You've been turned. I know this feels like the end of everything you once knew. The fear, the hunger, the darkness inside you, it's overwhelming, isn't it? But listen to me. You don't have to become the monster you fear. You don't have to lose yourself to this. We've been where you are now. We've felt the same rage, the same despair, and we've learned to live again not as predators, but as beings who walk among humans, who understand the delicate balance between what we are and what we can be. Let us guide you. Let us show you that there's still light, even in the shadows. You're not alone anymore.
I nodded, though doubt gnawed at me. Could I really live like this? Could I resist the urge to feed on humans and survive on animal blood or donated supplies, as they suggested? Lucian seemed to sense my hesitation. He stepped closer, his gaze unwavering.
The hunger will never go away, but you can master it. You can choose to be more than your instincts. The alternative is a life of chaos and destruction, a life that will end with a stake through your heart or a mob at your door. The choice is yours.
I took a deep breath, though I no longer needed to breathe. I had lost my job, my sense of normalcy, and now my humanity. But I still had a choice. I could let this curse consume me, or I could learn to live with it, to find a way to coexist with the world I once knew. Training with the Covenant was grueling. I learned to control my hunger, to feed without killing, and to navigate the shadows without drawing attention. But the struggle was constant, a battle between my humanity and the beast within. My wife grew more concerned as I withdrew further, making excuses for my odd behavior and late nights. I wanted to tell her the truth, but how could I? How could I explain that the man she loved was now something else entirely? The guilt weighed heavily on me, but I clung to the hope that I could find a balance, a way to protect her and the life we had built. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was determined to walk it. I had lost so much, but I refused to lose myself. As the months passed, the longing to be human again never left me. I missed the warmth of the sun, the taste of food, and the life I'd lost. Then, during a Covenant meeting, I overheard Lucian mention Celine, the vampire who had turned me. She was a rogue, dangerous, and unpredictable. But there was a legend. If I killed her, I might regain my humanity. I confronted Lucian, asking if the legend was true. He warned me that Celine was powerful and elusive, and that the legend might be nothing more than a myth. But I didn't care. I had to try. "I'll do it," I said, my voice steady. "Teach me." The hunt was grueling. Using my heightened senses and newfound abilities, I tracked Celine to an old, decaying mansion on the outskirts of the city. She was waiting for me, her beauty as haunting as ever. We fought fiercely, her centuries of experience pitted against my desperation. In the end, I plunged a silver dagger into her heart. As she disintegrated into ash, I felt a warmth spread through my body. My fangs retracted, my senses dulled, and the hunger vanished. I was human again. I stumbled out of the mansion as the sun rose, its warmth a reminder of the life I had regained. Though I didn't know what the future held, I was grateful to be alive. I made a silent vow to never take my humanity for granted, and to protect the world from the darkness I had escaped. Celine was gone, but there were others like her out there. Though I was human again, I would never forget the lessons I had learned in the shadows. For now, I would live in the light, cherishing every moment of the life I had fought so hard to reclaim.
I moved through the streets of New York City like a shadow, my presence barely registering in the minds of the bustling crowd. The city never slept, and neither did I. The neon lights reflected off my pale skin, and the hum of life around me was both a comfort and a torment. I had walked this earth for centuries, adapting to the changing times, blending in with humanity while feeding on their lifeblood. But I was no monster. I only took what I needed to survive, to sustain my eternal existence. My name is Lucian Blackwood, and I am a vampire. The city was a labyrinth of secrets, each corner hiding a story, each shadow concealing a truth. I had seen empires rise and fall, had witnessed the evolution of humanity from the shadows. But New York was different. It was alive in a way that few places were, a pulsating heart of energy and ambition. It was here that I had chosen to make my home, to lose myself in the anonymity of the crowd. It was on one of these endless nights that I first saw her, Elena Reyes. She was different from the others, her eyes sharp with curiosity and determination.
We are live at the scene with an eyewitness who saw the robbery unfold. Sir, could you describe what the suspects look like?
I had been watching her for some time, intrigued by her relentless pursuit of the truth. She was investigating a series of mysterious deaths, each victim found drained of blood. I knew she was getting too close to the truth, and I felt compelled to intervene. Our eyes met across the crowded street, and in that moment, I felt a connection that I hadn't felt in centuries. She approached me.
Lucian, I need to uncover the identity of the person responsible for these brutal murders. Can you assist me in finding the truth?
Her curiosity outweighing her caution. I could see the questions in her eyes, the hunger for answers. And so, I revealed my true nature to her, expecting fear and rejection. But to my surprise, she was fascinated rather than frightened. Elena proposed a deal. She would keep my secret if I allowed her to document my life, to tell my story to the world. I was hesitant, but I saw in her a kindred spirit, someone who could understand the weight of my existence. Reluctantly, I agreed. Together, we embarked on a journey into the heart of the vampire world, a realm of ancient rituals, hidden societies, and timeless battles. Elena's tenacity and intelligence amazed me.
Lucian, I believe most of the murders have been concentrated in the northeast south of the city. To cover more ground, we need to divide and patrol multiple blocks simultaneously. We can't afford to waste time. This calls for a precise strategy to track down these rogue vampires before they strike again.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Your plan could actually work. It's our best shot at stopping this chaos. If we move quickly and stick to the strategy, we might just save countless innocent lives. Myself opening up to her in ways I hadn't done with anyone in centuries. We spent countless nights together, exploring the city and delving into the mysteries of my past. She wanted to know everything: how I had become a vampire, the lives I had lived, the people I had loved and lost. I told her of my transformation, of the curse that had been placed upon me by a vengeful witch. I spoke of the centuries I had wandered, the battles I had fought, the alliances I had forged and broken. As Elena delved deeper into my world, she uncovered a dark conspiracy. A powerful vampire coven, led by the ruthless and ambitious Countess Valeria, sought to overthrow the fragile peace between vampires and humans. Valeria believed that vampires should rule over humanity, using their powers to dominate and control. We found ourselves caught in the crossfire of this impending war. I, who had long sought to live in harmony with humans, knew I had to stop Valeria. But to do so, I would have to confront my own past, the sins I had committed, and the darkness within me. Elena and I began to gather allies, both human and vampire, who shared our vision of coexistence. We met with ancient vampires who had seen the rise and fall of empires, who had fought in wars that had shaped the course of history. They were wary of Valeria's ambitions, but they were also cautious of me. They knew my reputation, the blood I had spilled, the lives I had taken. The final battle took place in the catacombs beneath the city, a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers where the vampire coven had made their lair. Elena and I fought side by side, our bond stronger than ever. But the cost of victory was high. In a desperate act to save Elena and thwart Valeria's plans, I sacrificed myself, using my own the source of their power. As the catacombs collapsed around us, I pushed Elena to safety, knowing that my time had come. I felt a strange peace as the darkness closed in, knowing that I had done what was necessary to protect the world I had come to love. Elena survived the battle, but she was forever changed. She carried with her the weight of what she had seen, the knowledge of the world that existed in the shadows. She wrote her book, The Blood of the Night, pouring her heart and soul into every word. It became a bestseller, though dismissed as fiction by most. But for those who sensed the hidden truths within its pages, it was a revelation. Elena became an advocate for the unseen, a voice for those who lived in the shadows. She worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between humans and vampires, to foster understanding and coexistence. She knew that the world was not ready to accept the truth, but she believed that one day it would be. Years passed, and Elena's work began to bear fruit. Small communities of humans and vampires began to form, places where they could live together in peace. It was a fragile peace, but it was a start. Elena's book became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was light. And in the quiet corners of the night, where the city's glow met the darkness, some swore they could still see a figure moving with an eerie grace, a reminder that the night was not always as it seemed. Perhaps in some way I still walked among them, watching over the world I had fought to protect. One night, as Elena walked through the city, she felt a familiar presence. She turned, and there I was, standing in the shadows. I had not died in the catacombs, but had been trapped in a state between life and death, my essence bound to the relic I had destroyed. It had taken me years to regain my strength, to pull myself back from the brink. Elena's eyes filled with tears as she ran to me, her heart overflowing with joy. We embraced, the bond between us stronger than ever. I had returned, not as the vampire I once was, but as something new. The relic's destruction had changed me, had given me a second chance at life. Together, Elena and I continued our work, building a world where humans and vampires could coexist. It was not an easy path, and there were many who opposed us. But we were determined, driven by the belief that a better world was possible. We traveled the globe, spreading our message of unity and understanding. We met with leaders and visionaries, with those who had the power to change the world. And slowly but surely, we began to see the fruits of our labor. As the years turned into decades, Elena and I remained together, our bond unbreakable. She grew old, while I remained unchanged, a constant reminder of the passage of time. But our love never wavered, never faded. It was a love that transcended the boundaries of life and death, of time and space. And when Elena's time finally came, I was there by her side, holding her hand as she took her last breath. She smiled at me, her eyes filled with love and peace. And as she closed her eyes for the final time, I knew that our journey was not over. For in the quiet corners of the night, where the city's glow met the darkness, some swore they could still see two figures moving with an eerie grace. A reminder that the night was not always as it seemed.
Welcome back, kitties. I hope you had a fantastic time watching the videos. Now go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Also, share this video with other ghouls like yourself. I'll see you in your nightmares.